Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. The Egyptian Cult of Isis. The ancient Egyptians positively loved the goddess Isis. She was the divine protector of the dead, the wife of Osiris, and the mother of Horus. She was worshipped by cultists for over 2,000 years before her influence spread beyond the Nile and perforated the Roman Empire. The cult of Isis was such a big deal that they constructed a temple in London, back when it was called Londinium, in the 1st century AD. The goddess is said to have been born from the primordial gods of earth and sky, Geb and Nut. She married her brother Osiris, who was then murdered by their jealous brother Set. Set chopped Osiris into pieces and scattered him across the world. However, Isis found his pieces, put him back together, and he is revived as Lord of the Dead. It's because of her origin story that Isis became the goddess of resurrection, which became one of the most important facets in Egyptian society. The oldest mention of Isis comes from an inscription on the wall of a tomb in Saqqara from around 4,500 years ago. She was worshipped locally by her own death cult and revered by the priests who mummified people. Mummification was all about resurrection, which was something that Isis had mastered. It wasn't until Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BC that her cult expanded beyond the Egyptian border. She became popular in Greece, and cultic death temples sprang up in places like Israel and as far away as Britain. Number 9. The Skull Cult. Archaeologists in England have recently revealed a primitive skull cult from 15,000 years ago. It's now become disturbingly clear that Paleolithic humans were involved in cannibalistic rituals for unknown purposes. Archaeologists have known for a long time that the prehistoric humans of England practiced cannibalism, but this newest discovery has pushed things to the extreme. It seems that after members of this mysterious cult skinned a victim's dead body, they consumed their meat, inscribed strange symbols on their bones, and then sucked out the marrow. They also apparently turned the skulls into cups like creepy dishware. The new evidence for this terrifying ritual comes from Gow's Cave in Somerset. Archaeologists found human bones with cuts and tooth marks, indicating they had been munched on like cobs of corn. The researchers also found skulls that had been modified to be used as dishware, and it was most likely for ritualistic purposes. Sylvia Bello from the Natural History Museum in the UK says the prehistoric cultists had been aware of what they were doing. Sylvia says the victim was partially eaten until bone was exposed. Then the eating paused while symbols were sketched onto the bone. However, the group didn't keep the bones with the inscriptions on them. Instead, they finished their meal and threw the bones away. Researchers can't figure out why they did this, or what the ritualistic purpose of the cannibalism was. The only theory right now is that the cult may have been feasting on their dead friends as a way to transfer knowledge. They may have believed that by eating meat of dead loved ones and scrawling symbols on their bones, they would absorb their knowledge and power. Number 8. The Vikings and Valhalla. In Viking mythology, when a warrior died in battle, they would be ushered into a glorious afterlife by a female figure called a Valkyrie. The Vikings genuinely believed the only way to die was in battle. If a man didn't die with a sword in his hand, he wouldn't be welcomed into Valhalla, Odin's great hall of warriors. Valhalla was a warrior's paradise, a great drinking hall built of spears and shields, and filled with as many beautiful maidens as a man could desire. The belief in Valhalla was like a warrior cult. According to Tom Shippey, an expert in ancient Vikings, it was likely their fanatical belief in Valhalla that gave them such success in battle. Tom describes the Viking mindset as a death cult, a psychological phenomenon that made the Vikings absolutely fearless. Unlike other warriors who were afraid to die, Vikings welcomed death with open arms. To them, death was only the beginning of what would be a tremendous life. However, Valhalla was not the end. The Vikings believed that Ragnarok was coming, and it was inevitable. Ragnarok would be the end of everything, and a great battle at the end of the world. Those brave warriors who had died on Earth would have another chance to fight, this time side by side with the gods at Ragnarok. This in itself was motivation to pick up a sword and fight at every given chance. Number 7. The Cult of Dionysus. In ancient Greece, there were so many cults it would take hours to talk about them all. Greeks loved being involved in these groups, although their cult activity was a little different than what you might be thinking. These people weren't drinking poisoned fruit punch. They were celebrating gods and myths while drinking a lot of wine. In fact, the cult of Dionysus was one of the preferred cults in ancient Greece due to its encouragement of copious wine drinking. Dionysus was the god of wine, fertility, and religious ecstasy. He had two festivals held in his honor, the Dionysia and the Linnea. The festivals usually included lots of drinking and lots of revelry and partying. These celebrations mostly focused on discarding a person's inhibitions and getting closer to nature by embracing physical pleasures. It's easy to see why so many Greeks took a shine to their favorite god. The cult of Dionysus worshipped their god through a ritual known as the Dionysian Mysteries. The ritual involved consuming not only copious amounts of wine, but also substances that could induce a trance, like hallucinogenic drugs. During this ritual, people became extremely intoxicated, danced and played music, and chugged alcohol out of bullhorns. The cultists believed that the intoxication felt from consuming these mind-altering substances was caused by Dionysus' spirit. In their minds, the god's spirit entered their bodies, got them drunk, and helped them to shed their stuffy human morals. Number 6. The Egyptian Cat Cult. One of the most popular cults in ancient Egypt worshipped a cat, or rather a feline goddess named Bastet. In the ancient city of Bubastis, a great cult was formed to give praise to Bastet, who was seen in countless images and statues from ancient Egypt as a woman with the head of a lion. She was a true lioness, and it was her cult temple in Bubastis that formed the focal point of the city. The famous Greek historian Herodotus visited the place in the 5th century BC and described it as magnificent. He even witnessed the festival of Bastet and said it was the most elaborate of any religious festival in Egypt. There were massive crowds, with everyone participating in rampant drinking, dancing, and general fun. The cult of Bastet was to the Egyptians what the cult of Dionysus was to the Greeks. It was an excuse to party, get wild, and drink until they got sick. Number 5. Baal. Throughout the history of the ancient Near East, Baal has been the name applied to multiple different deities. He is the antagonist of the Israelite cult of Yahweh, and he was worshipped as far back as the Akkadian Empire. His name is at least 3,400 years old, and he was king of the gods in the ancient city of Ugarit in modern-day Syria. The original story of Baal involved him dying, descending into the underworld, and returning to life to be the king of the gods. Many scholars believe his story was the very first in a string of death and revival mythologies that came after it, including the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Baal is best known for his role in the Bible in the story of the Phoenician princess Jezebel. The story takes place around 842 BC, with Jezebel encouraging the worship of Baal. She was part of the cult of Baal and married the Israelite king Ahab, who also worshipped Baal instead of Yahweh, the Israelite god. In the end, Jezebel was murdered. The prophet Elijah declared Yahweh the one and only God, and the Baal cultists were executed, and their temples were destroyed. Even though this is a biblical story, it has a solid base in reality, as the 9th century BC was a pivotal point for world religion. The Israelites believed in the one true God, Yahweh, while much of the world was still worshiping a wide number of gods and participating in cults. The Canaanites worshipped Baal, who had already been around for thousands of years, but he was slowly and surely replaced by the new cult of Yahweh. Baal, like so many of the old gods, was eventually cast aside. He would later become the figure Beelzebub in the New Testament and be linked to the Christian devil. Number 4. Cult of Artemis. The coastal city of Brauron in Greece was settled around the year 3500 BC. It remained a small and peaceful settlement up until the 8th century BC, when Athens was formed. Around this time, the great ruler Theseus unified the 12 settlements of Attica to form what became the greatest city of the Mediterranean. The town of Brauron was no longer a town, but a district. It morphed into a religious site, the most important place in the ancient world for the cult worship of the goddess Artemis. The cult of Artemis was unique because it was primarily occupied by women. Artemis was goddess of the hunt, the wilderness, the moon, and chastity. Women flocked to Brauron to join the cult because it was centered around fertility and childbirth, as well as the symbol of a strong female goddess. Around the year 500 BC, a temple was built in the goddess's honor. And shortly after that, the sanctuary of Artemis Brauronia was constructed in the heart of Athens on the Acropolis. The most famous ritual performed by the cult involved a girl's transition into womanhood. Teenage girls would travel to the sanctuary of Artemis from all over the region, and they would undergo an intense ritual overseen by the priestesses. The young girls would wear the skin of a bear and walk 15 miles from the sanctuary in Athens to the original sacred temple in Brauron. The journey was supposed to represent their passage from childhood into womanhood. Sadly, Xerxes and his Persian army destroyed the temple when they invaded in 480 BC. Number 3. Neolithic Cultists at Avebury. Avebury is a Neolithic monument that is less well known than Stonehenge, but is equally fantastic. It's a huge ceremonial monument that covers over 20 acres and is 1,000 yards in circumference. There were originally 98 standing stones in the outer ring, with 2 more circles of standing stones inside, kind of like a bullseye. It was built about 5,000 years ago, and most likely began with a mysterious cult and a great stone altar. A research team from the University of Leicester recently discovered a hidden stone square at the very center of the monument inside its 3 rings, which they believe was built before any stones were erected. They found that the square was originally encompassed by a mysterious wooden structure that is no longer there. Nobody knows exactly what was built here, only that it was the first piece of the puzzle, and everything else sprouted up around it. Researchers say it may have been a ritual space, a simple shack with a stone altar where a prehistoric cult came to potentially perform sacrifices. The rest of the stone rings came up around it as time went on, and eventually, the structure in the center was lost. Number 2. The Cult of Kavadi. The Cult of Kavadi is very mysterious. The Kavadi was a group of deities that may have origins in ancient Phrygia. They were worshipped across Macedonia and many parts of Greece. Researchers believe the deities were most likely promoters of fertility, and that they were believed to protect seafarers. In classical Greece, there are 2 main deities in the group, Axiocersus and his son Cadmilus. There were also 2 female deities, Axieris and Axiocersa, though they weren't worshipped quite as frequently. Those who worshipped these deities were part of a mystery cult. These types of cults in classical Greece were fringe religions, dominated by secrets and often referred to as mysteries. These were groups of people who worshipped a god or goddess, or some other strange deities, and held their rites and rituals as closely guarded secrets. For example, the famous Eleusinian Mysteries was one of these religions, one of the most popular in Greece, and yet so secretive we don't even know what the cult did 2,000 years later. The members of the Kavadi cult possibly performed fertility rituals and rites of purification. However, like so many of the mystery cults of ancient Greece, nobody knows all the specific details. The cult fell out of favor around 323 BC, with the death of Alexander the Great and the fracturing of the Macedonian Empire. Number 1. Mithras. Mithraism was another mystery cult, only this one appeared fairly recently and was popular among Romans. The Mithraic Mysteries, as they were also called, had its followers worshipping a deity from ancient Iran named Mithras. Mithras was the god of friendship, which seemed to resonate with the Roman people. The first Mithraic cults were formed in the 1st century AD, and cult activity spread across the Italian peninsula. The cult eventually seeped across the borders and into the rest of the Roman Empire. Followers of the cult were called votaries, and they frequently worshipped Mithras in caves or any other dark and mysterious place hidden from the public. Researchers believe this wasn't done to evade authorities, but to make members of the cult feel like they were a part of something special. The cult was all about building close connections and belonging to a family. However, something happened with the Mithraic cult that was never seen before. It blew up, and hundreds of temples wound up being built across the Roman Empire. What began as a fringe group of cultists worshipping in caves became popular, and Mithras was soon openly prayed to in huge temples from Britain to Syria. The cult became a major religion, and it would have kept spreading if not for the establishment of Christianity in the 3rd century AD. Christians began destroying temples to Mithras, and most of the followers of the cult either gave up or were converted by the 5th century. Thanks for watching! Which of these mysterious cults did you like the most? Let me know in the comments below, and also let me know if you'd like to see a part 2. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon. Bye!